Greetings. This is Like Me Officially podcast. I'm JK, and this is where raw truths meet reflection, where I challenge social narratives, explore self-efficacy, and move beyond surviving life-changing experiences into courage, self-insurance, and thriving. Because if you're anything like me, you'll recognize that life is for living and living freely. Hashtag our time to thrive. Today I'm talking about the cost of witnessing. But before I go any further, a quick note. This episode touches on suicide, sexual violence, and the emotional weight of living inside a news cycle. No graphic details will be shared. This is also my lived perspective on something complex and heavy, and it's not intended to be a judgment on anyone else's experience or path. If anything feels heavy, please step away, come back when you're ready, because you matter more than this episode. People know Virginia Giuffre's name because of Jeffrey Epstein, but that was only part of her story. She became known because she spoke out, refused to be an observer in her own story, and refused to let her voice be minimized, dismissed, or silenced. And she had the courage to stand firm in herself. I always found that so powerful whenever I heard her speak. She didn't have all the answers, but because she chose to speak when silence would have been easier, and she started and led conversations so many people wanted to avoid, I admire her so much for that. And the conversation she had wasn't just about abuse, but about power, credibility, justice, and what it costs to tell the truth when powerful people would rather you didn't. She created space for others to speak, for those who couldn't, those who weren't ready, and for those who never got the chance. But first, she stood up for herself. And in many ways, that was the most powerful thing of all. And when she died, and when I read that she had passed, I cried. Not because I knew her personally, but because I recognized her. I recognized something of myself in her. And Cassie, who is still here, still having to watch her experience play out in public, still having to sit with the scrutiny, the assumptions, objections, and blame directed at something that happened to her. That's a different kind of cost. Not the cost of losing the fight, the cost of still being in the fight. And when I think about both of them, one who lost her life to suicide and one who is still fighting the war of public and justice scrutiny, being the witness in her own story as it continues to play out in front of the world with no end in sight. And I think about war in general, not just the wars making headlines, about the cost of war more broadly, about the conflicts that are so often shaped by power, money, politics, and competing interests, and about the women and girls who, in those conflicts, can pay the highest price simply because of their gender. I cry every time I read that someone who has carried this has taken their life, not from pity, from recognition. Did you know there are at least 16 active conflicts happening in the world right now? So that's 16 wars. When I discovered that, my immediate thought wasn't about politics. It wasn't about who owns what land. It wasn't even about the bombs. My first thought was for the women and girls who will be harmed simply because they are women. Because history has shown us time and time again that when war and conflict break out, women and girls often pay a price that rarely makes the headlines. And I've often wondered why. Why is it that the bodies of women and girls become part of the battlefield? I'm not going to list the atrocities. A simple search will reveal the stories, the numbers, and the unimaginable acts taking place across the world in countries like Sudan, DR Congo, Ukraine, Myanmar, Yemen, Gaza, Afghanistan, the Sahel, Haiti, Ethiopia, Syria, Mozambique. The United Nations verified over 4,600 cases of conflict-related sexual violence in 2024. And by 2025, that figure had more than doubled to nearly 10,000. And they were clear that doesn't come close to reflecting the reality. What I'm interested in are the women and girls behind the statistics, those whose experiences will eventually appear in reports, inquiries, legal cases, and policy papers. They'll be spoken about in conferences and forums and debated about in government rooms. Those whose lives become evidence, whose pain becomes data, and whose experiences are analysed, debated, and discussed by people who weren't there but need to know what happened. These women and girls become the witness to their own experience. Because when you lift your eyes from the active conflict zones, the math gets even more staggering. Globally, 1 in 3 women will experience physical or sexual violence in her lifetime. That means an estimated 840 million women and girls around the world will share some version of this experience. They will be from different countries, cultures, and circumstances, but sharing a familiar reality, the reality of living through something that changes you and then having to convince others that it happened. I haven't lived through a war zone, but I know the internal war, the war that doesn't appear on any map, the one fought in silence, the one where life carries on around you while you're still working out what to do with what happened. And I know what it takes to tell your truth over and over and over again to people who need proof before they'll act. The reality is that war on women and girls doesn't start or end in conflict zones. A different kind of war is being fought every day through trafficking, grooming, exploitation, coercion, and abuse across countries, communities, and generations. The battleground may change, the tactics change, but the impact remains. That's why I cried for Virginia and for Cassie, not from a distance, from recognition, because the cost of witnessing is real. Nobody told me this when I survived. Nobody sat me down and said, by the way, for the rest of your life, certain news stories won't just be news to you. They will be like events. They will feel like events. They'll happen in your body as well as on your screen. I had to learn that for myself, and the learning hasn't always been calm. Bessel van der Kolk has documented what happens when trauma responses are reactivated by indirect exposure. The body doesn't read the news, the body feels it. So when a story breaks about grooming gangs, about an abuse of power, about a woman who didn't survive, or a woman who was pulled by her hair down the corridor, my nervous system isn't processing information, it's responding to threat. Because somewhere in its memory is the original threat, and the new story reaches back and finds it. For me, that's not a weakness anymore. That's not oversensitivity anymore. That's an acceptance that my nervous system is doing exactly what it was built to do. Sometimes I'm not just reading a story, I'm encountering an arena I know well, and there's a cost to that. Mental, physical, emotional. And the truth is, I never really know what that cost will be until the reaction happens. I never quite know what I'll need in response. But what I can say is that over the years, I've become much better at recognizing those reactions and walking through them in healthier ways. Once something reaches beyond my intellect and touches my lived experience, I can't engage with it in quite the same way as others. The story may be new, but the arena isn't. Something in me recognizes it before I've even fully processed what I've read or what I've seen or heard. That's why I can easily cry when I hear or read that a sister has ended her life, or that a sister is retelling her story, her trauma, her experience. Not because I know her or know her story well, but because I know something about carrying a battle that other people can't always see. I know something about trying to build a life while carrying experiences that continue long after the event itself. And I know something about the effort it can take to keep moving forward while parts of you are still trying to make sense of what happened. And I know something about how exhausting that can become. Rape Crisis England and Wales published a report in 2025 called Living in Limbo. This report documents the sustained load survivors are already carrying, the waiting, the not knowing, cases moving at a pace that has nothing to do with the pace of grief, healing, or recovery. The way survivors are expected to maintain a functional holding pattern while their lives sit in someone else's hands. And what this news cycle does, what it's been doing, is pile onto that load without acknowledgement and without room for pause. Gabar Mate writes about what happens when the internal cost has nowhere to go. It doesn't disappear, it accumulates. It finds another way out. So when I say the cost of witnessing, I mean the cost, not the inconvenience, the actual cost to a body that was already working harder than anyone sees. That's my experience. The post experience will look different for everyone who carries something like this. And that's not a flaw in the process. That's the nature of it. So I'm going to share, I've never shared this before, but I'm going to share what I actually do, not what the wellness industry recommends. I don't have 5 steps, nor do I have a routine that looks fantastic on Instagram, but what I actually do. We've been sold a version of coping that has never really worked for me because my life isn't a Netflix film or documentary. And so I've learnt to do things my way. The wine, the cake, the comfort of numbing. I understand the pull of all of it. When everything is heavy, dulling it feels like such a relief. But I've learnt slowly, honestly, sometimes painfully and costly, that my body doesn't need to dull itself. It needs to be present with itself. It needs to acknowledge the frustration, anger, shame, pain, not for anybody, but for myself, even when it's ugly. And especially when it's ugly, because it's only when I'm fully present with what's actually happening with me, when I can accept the moment without running from it and dulling it, that the release becomes real. The surrender, the space that opens afterwards, that's the sequence. Presence first, release second, not the other way around. I didn't always know that. And for a long time, I would shower, and I showered a lot. It felt like self-care. It felt like cleansing. And then one day I was present enough with myself to see what was actually happening. I was trying to wash away my shame. The shower had become a toxic expression of something I hadn't quite realized. Something that I wasn't yet ready to look at directly. Once I could see it, I stopped, or I could stop, because I started doing the work. And the work wasn't dramatic, and the process wasn't instant. I just noticed my actions, and slowly I stopped. And then totally course corrected. I stopped showering when I felt distressed. I stopped drinking alcohol. I stopped overspending, not because someone told me to, but because I was honest enough with myself about what it was actually doing to me. Over the years, I've noted what was really happening underneath behaviors that looked like coping, and I've changed them one by one. And it happened at the right time. And each change happened at the right time. So here's what it looks like now. I journal. Whatever is running around in my head, I write it out. I don't look to resolve the situation, but by writing it out, I can see clearly what I'm feeling. Though getting back to journaling was its own journey, because when I was younger, I would write lots of short stories and poetry and songs, and I had a diary where I'd put all of my writings in, my most uninformed thoughts, and indirectly, it was discovered and thrown away. So I stopped. What helped me get back into it was the 5-minute journal. Honestly, that 5-minute journal was a godsend. It helped me think beyond my pain, to acknowledge the good things in my day. And when I couldn't find the good, I started to create space for it, to make it happen rather than wait for it to happen. Breath work has also helped immensely. Slow, intentional breathing, telling my brain I'm safe enough in this moment. Doing this daily has helped me breathe again, literally. It's helped me reframe my body's relationship with breathing, because for a long time, not breathing fully was how my body survived. Shallow breath, held breath, anxiety that made even the act of breathing feel like effort. Breath work has helped me find my breath again, and with it, a different kind of presence. And movement in whatever form matters. I don't think it's just about exercise. It's about reminding the body, my body, that it can move again. Reminding my body that it's not stuck. Trauma left the memory of feeling frozen, unable to move, stuckness, incapable. Movement reminds my body that it's safe to soften, to release the tension, and to keep moving forward. And I walk a lot outside, not the tree hugging or barefoot on the grass version of walking. That's not my thing, and I'm not pretending otherwise. I need is to feel the rain on my skin, the wind hitting my body, the sun caressing my face, and to be able to see the depth of the sky and to really look at it, not just glance at it, and to see the insightfulness and wisdom of the moon, the stability of it, the cheekiness of it, and the way it shows up differently every time. And I need to see the stars, the rainbow when it comes. The rainbow reminds me of the variety of life, the limitless possibilities, and of the fact that I'm here, I'm still here, and I'm still alive. If God created every element and gave each one a place in His kingdom, then I too have a place here. And I too am entitled to own the space I've been given. That's my connection to my life. I dance, sometimes in my kitchen, sometimes in the bedroom, sometimes ridiculously with no rhythm, and sometimes with so much rhythm it leaves me stunned. And I sing out loud. I don't need an audience. Sometimes it's praise and worship, and sometimes it's a motivational headbanger. I don't overthink it. I just pay attention to what my soul is reaching for. And sometimes I need to sing until I connect with myself, until I remember who I am beneath the noise, beneath the headlines, beneath the weight of everything else. And those moments still blow my socks off, because that's often when I feel most reconnected to myself, to God, and to the life I've been given. And sometimes I simply cry. I cry until I'm tired, until I feel emptied of every ounce of water and moisture in my body. Those moments still scare me sometimes because they're both unexpected but deeply needed. For years, I thought something was wrong. Now I understand something different may be happening. I've learned that emotional tears can carry stress hormones out of the body. They can trigger the release of chemicals associated with comfort and relief. They can also help shift the nervous system away from a state of constant vigilance and towards rest. I don't think about any of that in the moment, obviously. In the moment, I'm simply crying. But afterwards, after I've rested, I'm often able to participate with the world again. Not because anything dramatically has changed or the story has disappeared, but because something in me has shifted, it's moved. Something that needed to be released has been let go. And I've learnt not to fear those moments quite as much as I once did. And somewhere along the way, I have also learned how to be my own safe friend. Because here's the thing. I couldn't ask that of others if I couldn't offer it to myself first. I couldn't say, I need you and mean it if I hadn't already learnt to sit with myself when things got hard, to not abandon myself in those moments, to be present with what I was actually feeling rather than running from it. Being my own safe friend came first, and then I invited others to be my safe friend. And in that learning, I stopped hating myself. I replaced self-harm with self-love, chaos with peace, and I started to hear my heartbeat again. And I'm so thankful for those who, without even knowing it, have been a touch point for me, who saw me when I couldn't see myself and who still see me. The grace and love given to me gave me the most extraordinary illustrations of what love actually looks like and what love feels like. Thank you to my safe friends. I'm sharing this because outside of the therapy sessions, I had a small army of people, my safe friends, who had my back. And it's so easy to forget that there are people in our lives who want to support us, but they can't or won't know what to do if they're not asked. And yes, some won't have the capacity to be there when you need them, and that's fine, because they're likely navigating their own challenges. And if that happens, just send them love. This is why learning to love yourself first matters so much. The Bible says, love your neighbor as yourself, which means self-love isn't selfish. It's the foundation. You can't pour from an empty cup, and you can't ask of others what you haven't first offered to yourself. And sometimes I call a safe friend. And my safe friends I can text, voice note, or call, as I said, and the only thing I need to say is, I need you. And their response is, how do you need me to show up? That question does something so important. It allows me to say what I actually need in that moment, not what I think I should need, not what would be easiest for them, what I actually need. And sometimes I need someone to hold me up virtually, to be silent while I find my way through my own chaos, because I'm not a natural ranter. That's not how I release. I tend to be quiet And more often now, I cry in silence. And they may not hear it, but they know. And they don't say a word. They just let me be. Those friends have earned the title of safe friend. They didn't get that title by accident. A former mentor once said to me, "You know your 3 a.m. friends." That's what a safe friend is to me. Not necessarily someone I speak to every day, every month, or even every quarter, but someone I have a connection with that doesn't require maintenance to be real. Someone I've given permission to show up for me and who has given me permission to ask. There's no judgment. No, this is what you need to do. They follow my lead into what I need. And that actually forces me not to abandon myself. It forces me to be articulate about what I'm feeling. And if I don't know what I need, I say that too. I don't always know what I need, but this is how I'm feeling. And if I don't know what I need, I say that too. I don't know what I need in this moment, but this is how I'm feeling. In recent years, my mum has become one of my safe friends. She had to learn how to be that without knowing that's what she was learning to become. There was a time I couldn't call her and just cry. She didn't know how to hold that space for me. It was very much, get yourself together, come on now. And I love that energy in the right moment. It has its place. But in those moments when I was crumbling, when I was a mess, a hot mess, it wasn't what I needed. Now she just lets me be. And then she'll say something along the lines of, "You know, you can always come over. I'll fix up the room and the bed for you." And that line usually gets me right because it's not that I don't want to go back, but I know that she has my back. And having a safe friend is like icing on the cake. Not the cake itself, just the icing. But don't underestimate what the icing does. Another thing I do is I clean. I sort through what's around me and I release what no longer belongs with me. There's something about clearing physical space that does something to my internal space. I still don't fully understand it, but I do it anyway. It makes me feel fantastic. I watch and I listen to what lifts my soul, and I'm intentional about it. Another thing I do is I rest in silence, no external noise. Music, sometimes without words, so basically an instrumental, if anything, and sometimes nothing at all. Because when the noise is constant, the news, the feed, the notifications, the ambient hum of other people's urgency, I lose the thread of myself. I find I can't separate my own signal from everything else coming in. And in my own silence, I can understand what I need and what's needed of me. Then I have a choice, lean in or lean away. These practices are ways of helping my brain and body learn new patterns through repeated experience. And most have never been done in isolation. I've always had a therapist or access to therapy, which gives me space to see my blind spots and stretch me uncomfortably sometimes. But I do it because I recognize that my experiences have rewired my natural way of seeing and existing in the world. And if I want an expanded life, I'm prepared to do what's needed to get there. I'm not prescribing a specific practice. Healing happens through repeated experiences that help us feel safe, connected, and present. What that looks like is different for everyone. Being a witness is not a role I asked for, but since it chose me, I have to find ways to manage all the feelings and emotions that come with it. 840 million women and girls. They are more than statistics. Women and girls whose stories end up in reports shared in conferences, government conversations, and justice systems used to argue a point, justify an agenda, or fight for change. Sometimes they're in the room, watching their own experience play out in real time. Sometimes they're not. Either way, their story is being handled by people who weren't there when it happened. Because what I see and what I hear from their experiences is determination, not resilience. And I'm going to be really precise about that word, because resilience can sound like absorb more, keep going, don't break. That framing has never sat right with me. Determination is different. The decision to keep moving, not because the system rewarded it, because someone said it was the wrong thing to do, but because something internal has decided, I'm not finished yet. The writer Andre Lorde understood this at a cellular level. She wrote from inside her own battle, illness, morality, a world that hadn't been built with her survival in mind. And she refused to go quietly. She was intentional. She lived with purpose and with the full weight of her own authority. She wrote about self-care, not as indulgence, but as self-preservation, an act of political warfare against a world that would prefer she didn't thrive. That framing, sits in my soul because it changes the stakes entirely. It's not I'm doing something kind for myself, it's I am refusing to be diminished. She wrote about what comes after survival, not survival as the end point, but as the beginning of the question, what comes after? How do I live in a way that honors what it cost to get here? How do I build something from this that means the cost wasn't simply absorbed, but transformed? She wrote to the future. From inside real, documented physical cost, she wrote to the future. And that's what I think about when I think about those 840 million women and girls, not just their pain, but their determination. From the woman in Sudan, who is still moving forward, to the woman in the DRC Congo, who is still protecting her children, to the woman in Afghanistan, who is finding ways to learn, to teach, to resist within whatever margins she has. The woman on this news cycle who cried this week and got up the next morning anyway. I mentioned the 840 million women and girls because it's a humbling reminder that what I've experienced didn't happen to me alone. That's not to downplay what happened to me, not at all. But in a strange way, it gives me sad comfort to know I'm not the only one. To know that indirectly there's an army of warriors and thrivers around the world who get me without even knowing me. And it also makes me angry. I don't think I'll ever fully understand why women and girls' bodies continue to be used as weapons in war zones and in the war on women and girls that never declared itself a war but has been fought every single day around the globe. From an infant to a young woman out with her friends, in the home and in alternative fake safe spaces, simply because of their gender. And in all of this, I also want to name that boys and young men face sexual violence too. In England and Wales, 4% of men have experienced sexual assault since the age of 16. That's over 630,000 men. Around 12,000 men are raped every year, and those are only the ones we know about. With so much division being created in the world, this is my small way of closing a gap. Sexual violence isn't exclusive to women and girls. It just happens to us more. The numbers tell us that clearly. And I know this firsthand because I was threatened that what was done to me would be done to my younger brother. So I know it can happen to boys too, and it does. That's resistance. That might be the most significant act of resistance there is. And I include myself in that. The internal war The one no one else sees is real. The translation cost is real. The weight of witnessing is real. It's not toxic positivity. That's not pretending the past didn't happen. That's resistance. Not because I'm making my experiences smaller, because they didn't matter, but because I recognize they're part of my life, not the whole of it. And I'm still here, not because I figured it out, but because I decided I'm not finished yet. I have every right to exist, every right to show up, every right to lift my head and walk with the straightest back and a strut that tells the world I'm here, still, and I'm not going anywhere. Andre Lorde wrote, "Act on your own behalf. Live your life as a tribute to your victory, not as a stifling reaction to your defeat." Let that sit with you, because it asks such a different question. Not what happened to me, but what am I going to do with the life that I have? What am I going to do with the life that remains? 840 million women and girls, some in conflict wards, some in courtrooms, and some navigating another day, getting through the day 1 hour at a time, all witnessing in some way, all deciding in some way what to do with what's been lived. And me too. So I want to leave this here, not as a question to answer, just as something to sit with. If I, meaning you, were to live your life as a tribute to your victory rather than reaction to your past, what would today look like? Not tomorrow, not eventually, today. And if you need a safe friend today or have any questions about anything shared in this episode, my DMs on Substack are open and I respond to every message. 840 million women and girls, 1 in 3, a population larger than Europe. That's who has experienced some form of sexual violence. So you're not alone, you were never alone. And like me, you might be a statistic, but you are a real person whose life was changed by an experience you never chose. So lift your head up, always, and choose to stand on the business of you. Thank you for listening to this episode of Like Me Podcast. If anything I've shared has made you stop, think, or see yourself just a little bit clearer, fantastic. I love this for you. I love this for me. And honestly, I love this for us. And if this episode shifted something in you, give yourself a moment to sit with it. And if anything felt a little bit too heavy, speak to someone you trust. What I've learnt is that we don't heal in isolation, and you don't have to carry any of this alone. This space isn't about staying in survival mode. It's about lifting ourselves out of the dimension that has tried to keep us trapped and choosing a version of ourselves that's still becoming. If this resonates with you, share with someone who might need a reminder or a friend. And make sure you're following the podcast so you don't miss the next episode. I'm JK. Stay open, stay self-curious, and remember, it's our time to thrive.